Hello. Sorry it's taking me a couple seconds to get everything going because this computer was not set up for my stream. Um, so I talked, what was it? I don't know, 2 weeks ago, about the problems that I had with my computer. It had to be shipped back to the manufacturer, and I didn't actually get it shipped out that first week. I got it shipped out this just a couple days ago, and so I was setting up the laptop I borrowed, and then I realized very shortly before the stream was due to go on, I had never actually set up my software with my stream key, so the software could not talk to Twitch. So I was frantically trying to get all of that set up, and I'm really hoping my sound is working. It's working on my end, but this stream has had sound problems so often. So I think I'm on. Hopefully it's working for everybody else. I guess I'll find out if I don't have audio and anybody yells at me and says they can't hear me. So hello, it is again a Tuesday evening, and I am being raided by Dirk Gently, apparently. Hello, Lara VAB's channel. And KT Ivan Rest, Kate is apparently now a pirate again. So, raiding notwithstanding. Um, so this is not the original topic I was going to do tonight. I was originally going to do, I was going to continue the shield work from last week, but I am having a bad spine day. Well, to be honest, I'm having a bad spine life, but particularly today, my spine has been nasty. So bending over a table, assembling things and cutting things and using power tools did not sound like a great idea. So instead, I flailed around last minute for a topic, and I remembered because I've been archiving my videos from previous weeks, that like 3 different people have asked me to talk about masquerades. So this is a good week for that because I can sit in a chair and not bend over a table with power tools and talk about masquerades. Now the caveat is I haven't actually like prepared notes or anything, so I'm just going to be talking. But feel free to throw questions at me if you have them because that'll give me a direction that people want to go in. Um, so Masquerades. I have been cosplaying for almost 20 years. I've been competing for just probably like 18 of those, 17, 18 years. So I've got a lot of experience in certain fan circles, fan event circles. Um, I will preface all this by saying that regionally, conventions vary dramatically in the way their contests are run. Also, they vary by what type of convention it is. So, sci-fi cons have different costume contests than comic book cons, which have different costume contests than anime conventions, which can sometimes be different from more fantasy-themed events. So, there are lots of types of contests. This is not going to speak to every single one out there, and it's not going to speak to every region because there are drastically different regional variations. Because the majority of the costume contests were established, they grew naturally and organically out of fan events, and whoever organized those events was making up the rules as they went back when this all started many decades ago. So I'm going to give you my experience and some generalities that I talk on a lot of panels with other judges about judging events and what we're looking for and that sort of thing. I'm going to share my judging sheet with you. I'm going to talk you through the process. I'm going to share my tips and tricks for if you're competing, like what to show the judges and what to tell them. I don't know if people want to hear horror stories, I can tell you those too. We'll see what happens. Um, we'll see how long I talk. So, costume contests, as I said, vary, but they all have typically one event in common, which is either the masquerade or the costume contest, depending on what they call it. Um, Almost every fan convention or Comic Con, Sci-Fi Con, whatever, will have some sort of costume event because cosplay is a big part of fan culture, and even more so now than it used to be. And cosplay goes back at conventions to the 1930s. Costume contests go back. I know people personally who interacted with them in the 1950s and 60s. They used to have masquerade events like a masquerade ball or a masquerade dinner. Before that, I don't know if they had a formal contest, but contests definitely go back to the 60s. So this is not something recent. If anything, the more recent development is the rules have become a lot more standardized over events. So you tend to see a lot of conventions sharing rule sets with each other, or a lot of them adopt the ICG guidelines, the International Costumers Guild, and so there are different tiers of competition skill levels and things like that that sometimes carry over. But basically, what it is you have a group of judges, you have a group of participants, and you have an audience. And typically speaking, and this is especially true in anime and sci-fi conventions, the judges will either be back behind the stage somewhere talking to attendees, or they'll have appointments and do interviews with them and look at the costumes. And they will judge the costumes based on craftsmanship or accuracy or whatever the guidelines are for this particular contest. And then, separate from the judging, in many cases, the attendees, the participants in the contest, will also have the opportunity to walk up on stage and show off their costume in front of the crowd. And the audience cheers, and people take their photos, and you do your little catwalk twirl, and then you go backstage and you wait for the contest to end, and then they give out awards at the end. To break it down a little bit more, and again, every event does this slightly differently, most of the conventions that I participate in have gone to an appointment judging schedule where you sign up for a time. When you sign up for the costume contest, you get a 5-minute block of time. At 1:15 p.m., be at this room. You will go in, talk to the judges, they'll look at your reference images, they'll look at your costume, they'll make their notes, and then at 1:20 p.m., you are free to go about the convention, and you reconvene at 5 p.m. for the contest. So you don't have to spend your entire day at the convention waiting in a room to be judged, and the judges aren't trying to frantically judge to get people up on the stage on a certain time. They have a little more leisure time to actually compare notes and judge the costumes. Some conventions, some of the ones I compete at still, do more performance-based judging, where the judges will sit in front of the stage and the judging takes place while the attendee is on stage. Typically speaking, the costume contests that have that kind of judging are not judging craftsmanship the same way that appointment judging is. And they're looking for more, hey, does the audience like your costume? Are you recognizable as a character? How do you behave on stage? So it's much more performance or character appearance based rather than I want to look at your seams and make sure that you actually constructed this costume a certain way. And there's not a correct or incorrect way to do it. You just have to read the contest rules ahead of time so you know which one you signed up for. And some people have a preference for one or the other. I mean, I do both. So what this boils down to is you are spending typically 3 to 5 minutes maximum with the judges. It's a very short appointment. Or you are up on stage for 30 seconds while the judges see your costume. So you don't have a really long period of time to be under a microscope with people looking at you. And people, I meet so many people who are scared of judging. They just feel really self-conscious. They feel, they have a little stage fright or something, and they get really nervous about, I'm going to go in and people are going to look at my clothes and they're going to look at my hems and they're going to stare at me. I don't know what to say, which I actually have given a number of talks on how to participate in the contest without, getting stressed out and losing your mind. We actually, if anybody is looking for more information in the future, and if this video is not available, we on our website, sewinghalfthebattle.com, which is here, somewhere up here, I think, we have a tutorial called How to Enter and Survive a Cosplay Masquerade. And it goes through the basic, this is how masquerades run, this is what to tell the judges, this is how to breathe when you're up on stage, and it gives a lot of guidelines for that. So if anybody is interested in competition and doesn't, know what exactly they would say to the judges or isn't sure how to pose on stage, you can go and read that. It's a free tutorial. It's just on our website. Feel free to distribute it with our name on it. But I am going to go into a little more detail on that here. So let's walk through the day. You get up. Costume contests at weekend conventions are usually on Saturday. You get up Saturday morning and you're all excited because you're going to cosplay your favorite character. And you get up, you get dressed, you eat breakfast, you eat something you don't not eat, and you drink water. You don't dehydrate yourself. These are important. And you put on your costume makeup and you put on your wig and you're all ready to go. And you go down to the convention center or wherever and you sign up for the costume contest. And they give you a little card with your time on it, or you just put it in your phone if they don't give you a paper card. And you say, okay, my judging appointment is 11 a.m. And you make sure you get there 15 minutes early in case they have more time open. Because if you can pick up a couple extra minutes to talk to the judges, it will only help you. It's much more beneficial to have more time so you don't have to rush through your presentation. So your time of your appointment comes around, and the person who is standing at the door and keeping track of such things, they usually have a stopwatch because the judges like to look at everybody's costumes longer than they have as well. So they call your number, you go in, and the judges look at you. And there's usually like multiple judges sitting behind a table. They're not judging you. I mean, they are judging you, but they're not judging you. And they want to know about your costume. So you go in and tell them what you made, First, you tell them who you're cosplaying. You show them your reference image, which you should always bring a reference image to your judging appointment, even if it's just like on a tablet or a laptop screen. Always have a picture. I prefer hard copies because then if your battery dies, you aren't stuck without references. So you say, "Hi, I'm so and so, whatever your entry number is. I'm cosplaying this character. Here's my character." Show them your references, and then tell them proactively what you did with your costume. I made this costume by hand sewing it. I assembled the pieces from a thrift store. I did this, however you made your costume. Go into as much detail as you can without dragging on over your time limit. And then the judges will probably get up and look at your costume up close. Now, most judges will ask before they touch you, but if one of them forgets, don't be startled if they suddenly, reach for your hem or reach for your sleeve or something. They're not just trying to grab you. They are just looking at your craftsmanship. So you can always tell them if you are uncomfortable being touched. That's certainly be upfront about that. But most of them are like, "Hey, is it okay if I look at your hems?" And then they'll turn over your hems and look at that and look at the way your costume's put together. Not all judges will do this. Most craftsmanship judges who are judging the way the costume is actually constructed will do this. So then they ask any questions that they might have. You tell them any last minute things like, "Oh, I also forgot to tell you, I styled the wig." Or sometimes they'll say, "Okay, what was your favorite thing about this costume?" Or "What did you learn making this costume?" And then your 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever the time limit will be up by this point because it goes really fast, even if you think you have time. And then you go out and you enjoy the rest of the con. And whenever they tell you to be back for the costume contest, you come back for the costume contest. When you arrive at the costume contest, having eaten and hydrated so you don't pass out backstage, you will be put into some sort of seating arrangement with your fellow cosplayers. That can be in a separate green room setup where they have chairs and you're waiting back there to go on stage. It can be in the audience of the room with the stage where they just have an area roped off for cosplayers, or depending on the setup of the facility, it could be you're lining up down a back hallway in the, service quarters of the hotel or the convention center, and so you're like weaving around the banquet tables and chairs that are all stacked in that maze of hallways back behind all the ballrooms. I have been in all of these situations, but you will be put someplace, you'll be put in an order that you're going to go on stage, and then you just chill out and talk to people and hang out until it's your time to go up on stage. When it is your turn to go up on stage, you will go up on the stage. There will be an audience. You face the audience. You strike a couple of poses and count to 5 so they have a chance to look at your costume and take photos of you. And, just be very calm and relaxed. I know it won't feel calm and relaxed, but you get up there and you're like, "I'm going to walk to the front of the stage and pose. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to break my pose and walk to the next spot." Sometimes the stage manager will have marked out, like, "Here are your posing spots," because we have the lights focused there. Sometimes they won't. If it's just a hotel ballroom with one of those little block stages and they don't actually have a lighting rig, just pick a spot and stand there. And then you walk off the other side of the stage. And then you go back to the green room and hang out and talk to people some more. And then eventually they will, when everybody's gone across the stage, they will give out awards. And you clap for everybody. And then if you get an award, yay. And if you didn't get an award, yay. Congratulate the winners. And then you go on with the rest of the con. It's actually not that scary. If there is a performance component, which some conventions have, sometimes it's also judged as a completely separate event than the craftsmanship component, then you, instead of going up and posing on stage, you go up and do your performance, which can be a skit or a dance or a comedy routine, or you're going to sing a song or whatever, lots of options. Most conventions have some sort of scripted, sometimes they have a recording prerequisite where if you're going to do a scripted event, or a scripted skit, you have to turn in a pre-recorded copy of your dialogue so the mics don't have to pick you up on stage, because the stage isn't always mic'd for a group. But all of that will be in the rules for the contest, which you can read well before you get to the con because they're usually posted on the website beforehand. Excuse me. So that is the attendee side of it. So you go in, you get judged, you go up on stage, you do your thing, and then you go off stage and you relax. Usually, and this depends on the size of the con, usually your judging appointment will take about a 15-minute block because you show up a few minutes early and then you have 3 to 5 minutes to be judged. And the masquerade itself will take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how big an event it is. Most masquerades at the average convention, not like the really huge San Diego Comic-Con, that's a separate animal. But like most of your average fan convention, mid-size conventions, you're looking at about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it can vary a little bit. So you're not giving up a whole day of your convention at most events, and it's just something extra you can do. And sometimes you get really cool prizes. A lot of conventions give out trophies. Some conventions actually get donations from the sponsors, and so you get like free merchandise or gift certificates. Those are always fun. Some conventions have started just handing you piles of cash, which is really fun. And you're like, "Yay! I won a cash prize. This pays for approximately 10% of the materials I put in my costume." But hey, sometimes we go out to dinner and we're like, here's our winnings. We're going to pay for dinner with the winnings. But that is the way that contests typically run. Sorry, my voice is a little rough. My allergies have been flaring up again because Indiana weather can't decide what season it is, and we're having another freeze warning tonight. It's like it'll be 80 degrees, then it'll snow, then it'll be 75 degrees again, then it'll snow it again. Anyway, so sorry if I'm a little rough today. Uh, So, from the judging side of things, because I also do judge, I actually judge more contests than I compete in nowadays. Here's what we're looking for at most conventions. And again, judging is subject to specific convention rules. So, if the convention says, hey, we're doing a look-alike contest, that's going to be totally different than a craftsmanship contest where we're judging how the costume is constructed. Um, I'm going to let you in on a big secret. This is my actual judging form. It's the one I use at almost all conventions. So the way we judge craftsmanship, and by we I mean me, Laura, most of our fellow judges, we are looking for a variety of things that go together to produce a good overall product. So one area is not always going to win. The participant with the absolute best technical craftsmanship may not be the best craftsmanship winner if they aren't good on accuracy, if they aren't good on presentation or something like that. So there are multiple areas that we're scoring, and we're looking for the person who does the best over a large area. So I don't know how well this shows. Probably not very. So I will read it to you. This is all. This is all alphabet soup for organizing the contest, so you can ignore that. This first category is overall, and this is things like the first impression of the costume, the overall appearance. Does it have a good visual impact? Does it look good from 10 feet away? Do you look like a character? Are you clearly in costume? So, and all of these are weighted equally, all these categories. So for the overall, if somebody walks in the room and they have, hey, that's a good silhouette, their colors are good, they're clearly in costume, they look like a character, their wig is on correctly, they are, moving correctly in the costume, and it's clear that they have a good range of motion and not, staggering in about to fall over because they can't walk in their shoes. That's your overall first impression. Does this look like a person in a good costume? Regardless of whether it's totally accurate to detail, regardless of how it's put together, I'm looking for first impression of the visual. The next category right here is accuracy, and this is how well the cosplayer or the costume resembles the reference images you are handing me. And I will get to reference images in a minute because I actually grabbed one of my judging binders to show you. But this is going to be, if you are cosplaying a character from a specific franchise, I want to see a photo or a screen grab or a still of that character, or I want to see what your inspiration was. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be doing, I am cosplaying Princess Leia from Star Wars. It could be, I'm dressed as a character from this particular era in history, and here are the references I used to design my costume. Or I am doing my own version of this. What if stormtroopers were Victorian era, military? What would we do differently? So you've designed a costume, but I want to see what went into the design of that costume. So either you're replicating an existing costume from a piece of media, or you have designed a costume inspired by certain things. Either one is fine, depending on the rules of the contest, but I want to see what you used to design your costume. Now I want Victorian troopers, Laura says. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, actually. I was just trying to, think of something that would combine two different elements. The next area on the judging form is attention to detail, creativity, and originality. And these are all kind of lumped in because the way they express in different costumes will vary depending on what costume it is. So we can't break them all out separately. But this is things like putting in little details that are appropriate, being creative in the way that you construct something, compensating for physics or body types that can't exist in real life. So I'll give you examples for each of these. Small details like attention to detail. Let's say you are dressing as a video game character who is human but turns into a dragon, for example. A really nice detail to put in, even if it's not in the source image. Maybe your source image doesn't have really good close-ups of all the costume details, but maybe you said, well, since this character turns into a dragon, I thought it would be really cool to have a dragon motif running through the costume, so the buttons I put on the coat have little dragons etched on them. So that was my way of acknowledging the other form of the character. And I have no idea if there probably is a character who turns into a dragon. Of course there is. There always is. But that would be something like you put a little extra detail into the costume and you were thinking about how to unify the costume as a whole. Also things like if your character, if you're doing a modern video game where you can see the individual pores in the game render's face because we have crazy technology now, maybe you put in, little extra details in the stitching, or you did things to match that really closely. That would be another way to do attention to detail. Ingenuity and construction. I have judged costumes where people used really creative materials or recycled things. People cutting up 2-liter bottles to make armor. People casting shapes out of found items to replicate parts of the costume, or making their own buttons by copying another shape, or using things creatively, using things maybe not as they were intended, but in a good creative way. Compensation for unusual physics or physique. If your costume has a part that floats over your head, how did you support it? Do you just have pieces of wire sticking up and holding it up, or do you have some way that it's suspended where the visual is not quite so obvious and you have to really think about how it's working? If your character is if you're cosplaying from one of the older MMORPGs where the characters are 4 feet wide and 4 feet tall and they look like a giant brick walking around because they have huge armor, how did you structure and support your armor to stand out and make you look more like that character, so proportionally you're built like them? If you are playing a character who is not of the same physical proportions or type as you, maybe you are a really skinny guy cosplaying Jessica Rabbit, and you have to build a curvy corset and some sort of structure to hold up the dress because that's not the way you're built. Something like that would be compensating for physique. So those are all sort of rolled into how did you really focus on making this costume the most interesting and the best that it could be, and being creative in your approach. And the last one, and keep in mind, since these are all scored the same, so this is all 25% of the total score on this sheet. The last one is construction, and that is your technical correct assembly. So that is things like, do you have clean construction? Are your seams correct? Are your hems properly finished, or do you have loose threads trailing? Did you iron your costume? Please, if possible, iron your costume. Do you have boning that is supporting the bodice of your costume? Do you have interfacing where it should be? Did you choose a correct fabric that is actually able to support the weight of the costume? Does the fabric you used, does it look like it's going to fall apart? Am I seeing tears in the seams? Anything like that. So construction and technical and sewing or craftsmanship. If not everything is fabric. Sometimes you're making a suit of armor. Sometimes you're making a giant mascot costume. Not all of it is clothing. But whatever construction techniques you used, are they technically sound construction techniques? Does it look like this is going to hold up? And so that is 25% of your score. So the overall appearance, the accuracy to your character or concept or design, whatever you're doing, the creativity, originality, and attention to detail, and the construction or technical aspects of your costume. Those are the 4 categories that I typically judge if somebody is coming in for a contest. And all of that we assign numerical scores. Everything on this particular sheet, it depends on the con, but this particular sheet, everything's out of 10, and then we have a total out of 40. So everybody's getting assigned a numerical score. Now there's also a big box for detailed notes down here, and this is where the judges can write, first they can write anything that was unique about the costume, like this is the costume with the giant rabbit ears or something. And I personally always take a reference photo for myself of the cosplayer with their number, so I can refer back, if I'm like, oh, these 2 scores are really similar, we need to debate between which one was which. If we've seen 27 Princess Leias in the same contest, I want to be able to tell which one's which. So I will usually just snap a picture on my phone for reference, matching with the number. And those photos don't go anywhere afterwards unless somebody specifically comes and says, hey, may I have my judging photo? That I don't put them up online or anything. But the notes allow us to make specific details about what we think was good or anything that maybe could have been improved. Now, this does a couple of things. One, if we have multiple scores that are right in the same range, let's say, 3 people in the contest got 38 out of 40, how do we put those in order? Well, we're going to go back to the notes and discuss, usually with all the judges, okay, what did we really like? Did this person's craftsmanship exceed this person's? This person had a really creative idea for how to construct a thing. And all of that is there's a little bit of wiggle room. Nothing is purely numeric. Because for one thing, if you're the first person we're judging of the day, we have no idea how your numbers are going to compare to the last person after we've seen 30 or 50 other cosplayers. So there's always going to be a little bit of a scale where maybe the first person we scored a certain way because we were expecting everybody in a certain skill level to be at a certain skill level. But then once we see, oh no, actually there's, everybody in this convention is a lot more advanced than we thought. So maybe we need to adjust our scoring to reflect the fact that they all have a lot of sewing experience, which is something that happens. It also happens the other way. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. And we always go back and revisit our sheets and say, okay, do we need to adjust any scores based on the fact that we hadn't seen anybody else yet when we did those scores? But then we also can use these notes later to give feedback. So if somebody contacts me, and almost every convention I judge at, I will be available on the forums, or I will give out my email address or something to the contestants and say, hey, if you have questions about your scoring or if you want a critique of your costume, feel free to contact me privately after the con, and I save my sheets for a couple of days in case anybody emails me. And if somebody says, hey, can you tell me why I scored the way I did, or can you tell me what I can improve about my costume? The notes here allow me to go back and say, okay, we really liked your concept, but you didn't finish your hems properly, so that's something you could improve before your next contest. So that's something I personally do. Not every judge does. Sometimes people just can't because you have 200 cosplayers in a contest and they don't have the time. But I try to do that for most of the conventions I judge at. And most of the time, the conventions have some mechanism, whether it's forums or a cosplay at email address or something like that, that we can use to communicate with people. And if not, if I ever judge you in a contest, you can feel free to go on my website and and ask me, because there is a contact form there. So that's typically what I'm looking for in craftsmanship. Now in performance, because I also judge performance sometimes, I'm looking for, first of all, the technical. Can I understand what you say on stage? Or can I see what you're doing clearly on stage? So, as with any stage-based performance, you want to have your big motions, clear diction, that sort of thing. How does the audience receive your performance? If you get up on stage and, perform in character and you do something that is a joke specific to your character, but the audience doesn't get it, maybe that wasn't the best choice for this convention, because clearly the people you're playing to haven't seen that show or don't know the character that well, or maybe your joke just wasn't funny and didn't land. Also, how much originality, how much thought did you put into this? One thing, and I say this, I have not, obviously I haven't been to anime conventions in a couple of years, but I also haven't judged performance at anime conventions for a few years. But one thing that was really popular about 10 or 15 years ago was lip syncing. So people would come out dressed as characters and they would lip sync to a pop song. I sometimes judge contests where we had 10 groups doing lip syncing to pop songs in the same contest. And by the 10th one, the audience is just kind of tuned out because there's nothing new happening. It's just, whatever, Lady Gaga song, everybody's dancing to Lady Gaga again. So if it's something where everybody's kind of doing the same thing and there's not a really new edge to it, your performance may not stand out as much as somebody who did something totally original. And that's going to vary by event, and you can't always anticipate it, but that's kind of the way it goes. And also sticking within guidelines is also very important. Every convention will have rules as to what you can and can't do on stage. They will also sometimes have rules about screening things beforehand. So one large convention that I participate in every year, they have very strict rules about stage combat, what you can do, what you can't do, whether or not you can be within the range of the edge of the stage when you do it. You have to show your entire performance or whatever to the stage manager beforehand so they can make sure it's safe. If you deviate from that in the actual performance, then frequently there's just an automatic disqualification. So that is something to keep in mind too. You always want to make sure that you have everything rehearsed exactly the way it's going to be, and you know exactly how you're performing before you do your performance, because otherwise if the stage manager says that doesn't look like what you showed me in rehearsal, now you've just hurt yourself or damaged your score or gotten yourself disqualified or in extreme cases gotten yourself banned from the event. And I know someone that happened to because he didn't quite follow the rules exactly. So keep in mind there are rules that need to be followed, as with any event. Now, I said I was going to talk about references as well. So this is, a few weeks ago, I showed my Dirk Gently, well, part of the Dirk Gently group that we did, the costumes. And I thought I had this up with me, and I went back and checked the video, and I did not have it with me to show then, so I'm going to show it now. Let me scoot my chair back a little so I can actually get this up on screen. So this is a 3-ring binder that I just happened to have my references in and haven't happened to reuse since then. But I'm going to show you what I do for references. Now, keep in mind, I go overkill with references. My judging references are way more than anybody actually wants to see. But my opinion is I would rather have it and not need it than not have it and have somebody have a question about it. Also keep in mind that I am competing. Oh yeah, sorry, Lars pointing out in the chat. Yeah, the rules are for safety reasons, not just pettiness. Yeah, if there are stage combat rules or don't drop things on the stage rules or don't throw things in the audience rules, they're there for a reason. Don't hurt anybody. Don't hurt yourself. So with regard to the references, I compete in the Masters or Professional division, depending on which convention it is. So typically we need more references because the judges want to see more of our process than, if it's your first or second con and you're in the novice division because you haven't pointed up into a higher skill level, they don't expect you to come in with a 3-ring binder with 17 pages of references. If you do, they will probably be impressed, but you don't have to feel like you have to do that. I'm going to show you what I use, and you can take as much or as little of it as you want for inspiration. And as the main thing is have a good, clear reference that shows your costume or your inspiration in color, full body. Do not do here's a grainy black and white headshot of my character, so you just have to try to extrapolate from that what the costume looks like. Because if we can't score your accuracy on the score sheet, you're just going to end up with like 50% points because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to put. You might have the most accurate costume in the world, but if we don't know, we can't score it. And your judges, it doesn't matter how popular your character is, your judges will not know the details of every single costume. There are a lot of them we do know, especially if we've made them, but frequently, even at conventions like I judge every year at a Doctor Who convention. I know a lot of Doctor Who characters. I myself have made 8 or 10 Doctor Who costumes of various characters. But Doctor Who also has an almost 60-year run, and there's no way I remember the details of one costume that somebody wore in a 1970s episode. So make sure you always have references. So this is what I take in for judging. I walk in and I introduce myself and I say what I'm from and I hand the judges my references. I have this one organized by my progression of how I made things. So the first thing I have in here is my swatch sheet. This is something that is absolutely not necessary and most judges don't even ask for. But for this particular costume, because we were doing fabric dyeing, because I was using some really unusual materials, I wanted to have my dye swatches and I wanted to have the different materials we used. Because I had things like this Panay silk velvet with lurex that I talked about that a little bit in the previous stream. It was the most expensive fabric I had ever used and I was scared to cut it for weeks. But I wanted to talk about, the different types of fabric I used and why I chose those particular fabrics. So I just cut a little swatch of each one and stapled it. This is real high tech. There's literally just a staple holding this to the computer paper and wrote down what it was. This also is helpful if I ever need to go back and say, wow, I would really like to reorder that fabric because I like the way it worked in this costume. What was that fabric? And then I can check my reference sheet. So it's useful for me too. Here are my walkthroughs. So I've got photos of the character for me because it's helpful for me when I'm organizing what I'm going to talk about in my presentation to the judges. I go through each part of the costume and talk about what I did. So the first thing I've got here is the clothing, and I have, what patterns I used and how I modified them. I have what fabric I chose and why. I have unusual things like I hand cut every piece of fringe on this costume because they're, commercial fringe wasn't available in that material colors, so all of the fringe was hand cut. Doing the applique. I've got little details, and I've also got like a personal victory that I did on this costume, which was lining up the pinstripes on the pockets. Those are there. This bullet list is here primarily for my benefit, so I can glance at it and refer to it when I'm going, okay, there are 3 judges staring at me. I need to remember to hit all the points in my presentation. by putting them down on paper, I don't expect the judges to read all this. They're there so I can refer to them and say, oh, that's right, I did want to talk about the material I used. Then I've got how I did the hats, how I made the slingshots. So I'm going through what parts of the costume and how I did it. I've got a page for each character. So the first page was Lissybits, second page was Panto. So I've got, this is a photo of the original costume from the TV show so they can compare it to the one that we made for our costumes. And I've got the notes here about it. I have some notes on the props here. So I've got the giant scissors swords, and I just realized this is a little low. I've got the giant scissors swords screen capped. Let me get the reflection. There, screen capped from the show. And then I've got notes about how I made them. And then I go into Queen Susie, and I've got her details and props and photos and everything. And then I've got, her props here with the book. This is a photo of the book from the actual auction listing when they sold it. And here is me in the process of making the book, so you can see what it looked like beforehand. And again, bullet points on all these with how I made them. Here's other details on the props. And this is something that I always include just so there is never a question. There. I'm trying to get it so there's a light up here that's reflecting right in it. These are a bunch of progress photos of us making the actual costumes. And these are here so that the judges have no doubt that we actually made them, because I've run into contests where, with things that I was judging, in fact, where I came away from a contestant's interview going, did they actually make that, or did they commission it from somebody or buy it online? I'm not sure, because they were really sketchy about how they did some things. And I don't want anybody to be in question about, did I actually make my costume? The other reason these are here is so that the judges can see the substructure of everything. So like on Queen Susie's crown, for example, which is right here, I've got photos of, here's the, there we go. Here's the wire form. Here's the aluminum armature I put over it. Here's the freeform air. Here's me sanding and painting it. So they can see, for their information, how it's actually structured, in case I didn't explain it very well. So I basically threw all of my progress photos in here. And the last thing I've got in here is my pattern sketches. And pattern is a very generous term, because these are basically just the notes I made when I was drawing things out and saying, okay, these are all the pieces I need to make. But I've got my little sketches for how I thought everything was going to go together, and that helps the judges see how what my creative process was. And again, all of this is overkill. You do not need most of this. This is here because I find it helpful, and because that way if there ever is a question, I can just whip open the binder and say, okay, here we go, which is good for my presentation. What I typically like to see as a judge is anything that is not really obvious about how you did it. I like to see some sort of documentation or picture of, if possible. So if you used a really unusual material, or if you structured something in a really unusual way and used a good support structure, it would be nice to see process photos or sketches or something that showed how you approached that. It's not necessary. It is never going to hurt you to have those things. So if you are going in, you're like, man, I'm going to enter a contest. I'm going to do a really good job in my presentation. I'm going to wow the judges with everything. Come in armed with a ton of references. Have multiple pictures of your character. Have shots of you making the stuff. Have sketches for how you designed it. And the judges are going to be thrilled, because they won't have questions about how you did it. You don't have to rely as much on explaining through the process. Because for one thing, you can go with that picture and 1,000 words comparison. You may only have 2 or 3 minutes to talk to the judges, and you're trying to get through an entire costume. If you can just say, and here's the sketches I show, how I broke it down, we can glance at those and say, okay, I see how you did that, and you don't have to talk us through step by step, which is, again, going to take up a lot of time. So you don't want to run out of judging time. And be as proactive as possible when you enter a contest. Go in, walk in with a plan. You can just walk in with a list of bullet points if you want, even if it's not a binder like this. Make notes to yourself. Just have a sheet of paper and you've written down, talk about the wig, say this about the jacket, say this about my shoes. And we don't care if you have notes to yourself for your presentation. In fact, we love it because it makes our presenting time more efficient. So you're doing great if you just go in with a plan, and you may even have practiced it ahead of time so you know what you're going to say, or at least thought through what you're going to say. And you come in and say, hi, I'm contestant X. My character is X. Let me tell you how I made my costume. Bam, 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 bam. Do you have any questions? And we're going to be thrilled because you have done a great job presenting, which again makes your costume stand out in our memory, because we aren't trying to come up with questions to ask. And on that note, if you walk in, and everybody starts a little nervous because it's a new thing you're doing. If you walk in and you don't present your costume and you're just, waiting for us to ask questions, frequently the judges don't know what to ask. So if you come in and stand in front of the table and you're like, here's my costume, we're floundering a little bit and trying to think, okay, did you sew your costume? Tell me about your process and stuff like that. We're going to have to try to pull things out. So it's much better and much more efficient if you can just come in and say, hey, here's my presentation. I'm ready to go, and have everything prepped. Um, so that's your super fast. I just realized I was talking really quickly and I'm pretty much done with everything I was going to talk about. That's your super fast overview of how a contest work. If there's anybody out there who has questions or anything else, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'm going to get a drink. And I would encourage anybody who's remotely interested in cosplaying to try out a masquerade at least once, because they are tons of fun. You make really good friends there, because when everybody's sitting in the green room and everybody's just slightly nervous and everybody's panicking about, does my costume look okay? Is everything straight? Do I need to fix my wig? There's a really great sense of community that develops among the people participating. And some of my really, really good friends I met through costume contests, when it's like, oh my gosh, something came loose. Does anybody in the room have a safety pin? And 17 cosplayers dive for their kits and have safety pins. So, you can really make some great friends and meet people doing that. Okay, we've got a question from Laura. If most people are using method A to build a sword and you don't offer any explanation, judges don't know how to ask you about your method B and you won't get credit for a really innovative solution. Not a question, but a statement. Yeah, that is a good point. So if you are doing, let's say you're building a prop that most people use EVA foam to make, for example, but you didn't use EVA foam, you used a type of thermoplastic. Maybe you cut up a bunch of 2-liter bottles and reformed the ABS and did a bunch of cool stuff. If we just see that and the last 6 people we judged used EVA foam, we won't know that you used plastic unless you tell us. So that is an excellent point about make sure that you are offering how you did things, even if you just mention what material it's made out of. That first tells us that you know what you're talking about. And second, that tells us that you approached it with a more creative, or at least a different approach than most people did, and it tells us something about your creative process. I love hearing people talk about what they learned or how they came up with an idea to do something. And it's fine to tell the judges what didn't work. You can say, oh, I tried making this out of foam first, but it didn't hold up, so then I switched to this other material and that worked much better. Experimentation is part of the process, so that's fine. You don't have to pretend like you knew what you were doing the whole time, because none of us do. And on that note, you don't want to focus on what's wrong with your costume. So let's say, you walk into the room and 80% of your costume is great, but there's one piece that you're really not happy with. Don't focus on the piece you're not happy with. Don't apologize for it. And if you're like, well, I know my boots are the wrong color, but I tried really hard to find some, and then, I couldn't find anything that was paintable, and then I tried this. Like, just mention the boots are the wrong color, but I did this other thing accurately. Focus on the good parts, because the judges are more interested in what you did right than in nitpicking every little thing that may not be perfect. And we also understand that things can go wrong with costumes. We're all cosplayers. Nobody judges a costume contest. Well, I won't say nobody. Most of the time, 99.9% of the time, nobody judging a costume contest got there by not being a cosplayer. So typically, if somebody is judging your craftsmanship, they've been through years of the trial and error and things going wrong and repairing things on the fly. So it's okay if stuff is not perfect. We don't expect everything to be perfect, but show us what is good. And be as positive as possible about your whole thing. Don't come in and be like, well, I'm sorry my costume's not very good, because that's not going to make us think really great things about your total process. We want to see what you're proud of. We want to see what you did right. We want to see what you did well. We want to see your creative side, because that's really that's what cosplay is all about. We're not coming in with a ruler and saying, oh, well, you were 3 millimeters off on this one hem seam, so forget it. Your costume is trash. Get out of my room. We just want to see how people implement the idea of making their costumes. And honestly, I am that judge who was like, I wish everybody had 10 minutes to present, because I want to talk to them about everything they did. I get really excited about costuming. And I'm like, oh, tell me how you did this. That was a really good idea. Did you try this? That's really cool. Oh, tell me about this material. And I could just sit there filling time for the entire period. And that's why we have to have a doorkeeper with a stopwatch to be like, your time's up. Next cosplayer, please, because we have no sense of time in there. Secret Within says, don't tell the judges what is wrong. Make them find it. And that's true. That's absolutely true. I have had cosplayers who did a really great job presenting, and then later I noticed something that, I hadn't even noticed during the judging appointment because they had done a really good job of presenting around it. And it wasn't until I was going back through my photos or something later and I'm like, "Oh, I just realized like that belt's totally the wrong width." Oh well, it was there, but I wasn't paying attention to it because they were talking about the embroidery they did, or they were talking about their prop that they made or something like that. So, focus on the good things. And I'm just going to throw this out there. Don't lie to your judges. I said before, judges are also cosplayers. Judges have experience with this sort of thing. If you just make stuff up wholesale, your judges are probably going to know that you don't know what you're talking about or that you're telling them something wrong. Case in point, and I'm not gonna get very specific with this. I had a cosplayer come in for judging once who claimed to have made the entire costume he was wearing head to foot from scratch. And I asked him what fabric he used to make his costume, and he said cotton. And I looked at this material, which was a really cheap, shiny polyester finished with a commercial serging that was clearly like a Party City Halloween costume of this character. Did not it was clearly a store-bought costume. And I said, "Cotton, and tell me about your serger." And he didn't know what a serger was. And I'm like, "So you made your entire costume head to foot, you magically turned cotton into polyester, and you also finished your hems with a commercial serger that you don't know what it is." Right. So, I have many stories about cosplayers who falsified their presentations and were found out. I don't want to dwell on them because, it's just, I don't want to dwell on that. But we usually can tell if you're making something up. So if somebody helped you with the costume, for example, if you made the fabric parts but you commissioned the prop, or you had somebody help you style the wig, or you had somebody help you set your sleeves, tell us up front. We aren't going to hold that against you. If you say, "Okay, I did everything myself, but my grandmother helped me sew these parts," that's fine. Just tell us that, and then we aren't going to expect you to fill in all the gaps on those. We'll focus on the parts you did. We're not going to judge you on somebody else's work. So if somebody else made your prop, great. You have it for the photos. It looks great. I'm more interested in your process on what you actually did make. It's not going to count against you that you got help. So always tell us if you didn't do something, or tell us if you had help with something, just right up front, and that saves everybody some angst. And do not come in wearing commercial garments that still have the inspection tags in them and tell us that "Oh, that's right, I forgot I sewed the inspection tags in as a joke." No, no, it's not going to fly. So anyway, I would encourage as many people possible as can try a masquerade to do so whenever we have cons again. Although some of them are starting up again. Gen Con's actually happening in person this year. We have hope for some at the end of the year. We might actually get back out. I think Chicago TARDIS is still kind of hoping that everything's open by November. I guess we'll find out. So hopefully I will see some of you at cons. Any other questions or comments in the chat while we still have plenty of time? We have 14 minutes left. Excuse me. Okay, I'm not seeing whoops. My chat is not refreshing. Come back. Come back. Okay, there we go. I'm not seeing any other questions. So, well, I guess I can just wrap it up early and send everybody off to enjoy their Tuesday evenings a little bit sooner because I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. But I did want to, since I'd had 2 or 3 people ask me in previous streams to talk through the competition process. At least now we have done so. And if anybody has any further questions about judging or about just going anything to do with competition, because I've been doing it for almost 2 decades, feel free to ping me at any of our social media. This side of the screen. Or you can email me, Alena at ensewingsalfthebattle.com as well. And if I ever have the privilege of judging you, you can say hello and I will give you feedback on your costume for free afterwards. So I have not had dinner yet, so I'm going to use the fact that I'm ending a few minutes early to go eat some food, which food is good. I like food. And this is your reminder that if you're at a con, hydrate and eat. Don't pass out. So I will bid all of you a good evening, and I'm going to go heat up some leftover pizza or something, whatever's in my fridge, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye-bye.